While the storm swirls, the two basic questions that remain unanswered, which we have seen come up again and again and again. The first one is this: while the doctors are treating the disease, who is healing the person? This is a very important question because most of the medical treatments, at least associated with cancer, are very tumor centric or organ centric or physical centric. And question number two is, why must I face one of life's greatest challenges alone, unprepared, and unsupported? This is a very, very uh, depressing question for many people, and they don't seem to have a way out. Just like any roller coaster, all of us who have been on roller coasters know that basically there are thrills and spills and unexpected surprises that keep coming up. And that's what we have to deal with when we are dealing with cancer. Now, the relationship between cancer and emotions is a very interesting one. There are two dimensions to it. Dimension number one is that emotions impact and can have a role to play in causing cancer. This is the science of psychoneuroimmunology. Our thoughts and feelings compromise our immune system. If our immune system is compromised, there is a good chance that we'll be ill, including cancer. But there is an other side of emotions and cancer, which is that cancer impacts emotions. That cancer is a phenomenon that completely puts our emotions in turmoil. And so today I'm not going to talk about the first part, which is how emotions impact cancer. Today, since this is a caregivers group, I'm going to talk about how cancer impacts emotions. So what I'm going to present now is what people feel and what people say. And I'm going to share with you what we have learned in this process. I hope you will be able to resonate. Again, since many of you are likely to be caregivers, put yourself now in the shoes of somebody who you're caring for and see whether this might be at work for them as I present this to you. So let me begin. What do people feel? Cancer shakes you and your family to the core. Every cancer diagnosis is a shock. And cancer makes you face your own mortality. There's no question about it. And because in our society, death is scary and mysterious and taboo, there is nowhere to hide and no one to talk it over with. This is a big challenge. And while all this is going on for the person who's been diagnosed with cancer, therefore, they would say things like, in their minds perhaps, or sometimes aloud, they may be saying things like, I'm going to die. In fact, this was my very first thought when I had my cancer diagnosis. Or they might be saying, what will happen to my family? And so this is now preoccupying the person inside them, whether they say it aloud or not. This is what is going on for them in their emotional landscape. So this is a very typical thing that happens when there is a cancer diagnosis. Many people have talked about the feeling of being betrayed, being traumatized, being overwhelmed, being ambushed. And therefore, people tend, because they're not able to articulate these emotions, you tend to express it as blame or anger or helplessness. And so as a caregiver, if you're coming into contact with these kinds of emotions and these kinds of situations, then remember that people are probably saying either aloud or to themselves, hey, I got cancer, but who's responsible? People are asking themselves the question, why is life so unfair? And people are also saying to themselves, I feel powerless to change things. Again, I invite you to just think of the person that you're caring for, and maybe even as a caregiver, you might be asking these questions. Cancer treatments are very difficult treatments, and they are not very predictive. The doctors are really trying to figure out the best way of treating a person with cancer, because each individual responds differently to their treatments. And because it is that kind of a process, treatments usually make things worse before they get better. And that whole experience of hospitals and tests and surgery and scans and chemo and radio, the side effects, the pain and the worry, everybody is, so deeply upset. They also add to your misery as a patient, because you know that what has happened to you, your illness, your cancer, is creating all of this. And so therefore people start asking this question, why me? Now, this is a very common and famous question, but I want you to see what is behind that question. What is causing that question to arise? It's all of this stuff. And the follow-up question to that is, what have I and they done to deserve this terrible suffering? So, one of the things that we have internalized in society in general is that suffering, there must be a cause of suffering, and there must be something that is responsible for creating that suffering. And when there is suffering that we see either in ourselves or in anybody else, our mind immediately goes to saying, what have I done to deserve this? In fact, many people we have heard asking this question, is this some kind of punishment? Is this some kind of natural or supernatural retribution? Right? And then this creates a tremendous amount of self-doubt, and this creates a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety in people. Now, if like me, your treatments are successful, you feel relief and euphoria. Things are great. My cancer has shrunk, or whatever it is, right? And when you start improving, this is a huge motivator to change your lifestyle and approach. So people ask themselves this, have I got another chance at life? And that leads them to say, I want to take charge, I want to do more, but how? And actually, unfortunately, neither the medical system nor the internet gives you very good answers to these questions. So as a result, people are fumbling around and bumbling around trying to figure this out. And that's the reason why, based on our research and our work, we said that, look, there is plenty of information available on the medical side in all the websites of the big cancer institutes and so on. But on the holistic and integrated side, there is not very good information. So therefore, can we provide that information, well curated information on holistic and integrated approaches to cancer, which is why we created the Cancer Awakens website, so that people can take charge of themselves and do more. As I said, taking charge of yourself is the critical piece to go from victim to survivor to thriver. Even if you're doing well, the nagging fear and anxiety remain. I can tell you that it's now 20 years since my cancer, but even today, when I have to go for a checkup and I go to the clinic, I still have butterflies in my stomach. And that's a perfectly human thing to happen. But if you're not doing so well, and the treatments are taking their toll, you have all the side effects and so on and so on and so on, you feel drained. You feel depleted of time, of money, of energy, of effort, and you really have to push yourself and you have to really restart and recharge yourself all the time. And one of the things that many cancer patients and families tell us is that after cancer, the future looks bleak and uncertain. In normal life, we are used to thinking of life as being on a steady upward trajectory. You go from school to college to work and then marriage and then children and then family and so on and so on and so on. Whereas cancer comes and kind of suddenly rocks everything and the future looks bleak and uncertain. And so, therefore, you might hear people saying things like, I'm a victim. Will my life ever be normal again? Do I abandon all my dreams and plans? I wanted to send my son to a US university. Will I be able to make that happen? What will happen to my daughter's marriage? Will she be rejected only because there is cancer in the family? And also people start asking themselves this question, am I out of the mainstream now? We have come across this in many of the clients who we work with, who basically have said to us that cancer, my company has accepted that I have cancer, but I get the feeling that my future career prospects are not going to be as bright as they might have been if I did not have cancer. And so, therefore, there is a certain sense of, I'm out of the mainstream. This is also something that can happen. If the treatments fail, that means if the cancer recurs or if the cancer spreads, there is a metastasis as it's called, then the medical efforts intensify. And so does the suffering, because now the dosage is greater, the combination of drugs is stronger, more aggressive, the side effects may be more. And most importantly, that things are not working, things are on a slippery slope. And what do then? You put up a brave front, but inside, like naturally to all human beings, you feel very lonely and you feel very vulnerable. Again, there is no one to comfort or reassure you. So people say things like this, I'm trying to be positive, but it isn't working. I slip back into my depressed or negative or downbeat kind of a state. This is something important that we have come across. People also say, I feel diminished and I feel somehow disgraced. It's almost as if I have been selected by nature to be pushed aside or to be marginalized in life. And therefore, my sense of identity and my sense of dignity has been attacked or has been adversely affected. And if that becomes worse and worse, then they really go into the dark depths of depression. Nothing matters anymore. Is life really worth living? Now, along the way, you also get well-meaning advice about scientific research, about complementary therapy. Somebody will say, oh, there is this experimental drug that I know is being done in Switzerland. You should try it. Or, have you tried immunotherapy? Or have you done this? Or, there is this person, there is this famous homeopath in Calcutta, and if you take his medicines. So you get all this kind of information and you don't know how to make sense of it. You are confused. You don't know what to believe, where to turn. People will tell you to do all kinds of things. And typically, therefore, the reaction from many people is that you either withdraw back into isolation or you jump back into an old normalcy. You say, forget it, the hell with it. I'm just going to go back to my old life and whatever happens will happen. And essentially what people are going through or what people are saying is, oh my God, there are so many unknowns. this uncertainty keeps me off balance. And there is a sense of resignation that creeps in. I'm resigned to my fate. Will I be fortunate enough to survive? So people start now thinking that it's really about luck, good fortune. Is it in my destiny? All through this process, all through this journey, you are aware that cancer statistics are chilling, as I said. More than 50% of people who get cancer die within 5 years, right? And people have this in the back of their minds. And so we tend to forget those thrivers. We forget those people who have beaten the odds. We forget those people who have done really well. And for example, when you go to the clinic or to the cancer center, you see other patients and families sitting there in the waiting room. Somebody has lost their hair, somebody is wearing a scarf, somebody is looking very weak, somebody is carrying a bag of something, and you can see the fear and despair in their eyes, and that transmits to you naturally. And you start asking yourself, are my eyes clouded with fear and despair too? Am I coming across like this? And really, at the bottom of it is this question, as I said right in the beginning, how long do I really have? You do hear the success stories, maybe miraculous stories, maybe stories of spontaneous recoveries. And a part of you is inspired and you want to emulate these survivors, which is good. But there is another part of you that may be resentful. We have come across this as well. So we have heard people say, I'll do anything as long as someone lays out the right path. If you tell me what to do, I'll do it. But people have also said this, those lucky people, what do they have that I don't? And in some ways that makes you feel worse about yourself. And as I said, some people can slip back into that victim mentality, which is, I might as well give up. Now, I've explained this in like 10 slides, right? This is the whole landscape of emotions that people see and feel and deal with, etc. And so while the storm swirls, the two basic questions that remain unanswered, which we have seen come up again and again and again. The first one is this. While the doctors are treating the disease, who is healing the person? This is a very important question because most of the medical treatments, at least associated with cancer, are very tumor centric or organ centric or physical centric. Whereas healing necessarily is person centric, right? It is not just me and my colon cancer, it is me, the full person, that has to be taken into account. That's question number one. And question number two is, why must I face one of life's greatest challenges alone, unprepared, and unsupported? This is a very, very depressing question for many people, and they don't seem to have a way out. And it is really in response to these two questions that we have created our cancer coaching program. And this is where we believe cancer coaching actually comes in. Ultimately, what's the summary of all of this? What we have seen is that basically there is like a Lakshman Rekha. And, Lakshman Rekha is one where you're not supposed to cross the Lakshman Rekha, but here I'm presenting this Lakshman Rekha and inviting you to actually cross it. Because on one side of this Lakshman Rekha is all the emotions associated with victimhood. I will let you read them. And I've already covered many of them in the preceding slides. Shock, confusion, uncertainty, the fear of death and loss, powerlessness, vulnerability, blame, externalizing the illness, despair, hopelessness, anger, frustration, depression, isolation, withdrawal, sorrow, coping with the present, meaningless suffering, and giving up. But here is the important thing, that since thriving is a choice and since thriving is a mindset, it is possible for us to cross over from this side of the Lakshman Rekha to the other side of the Lakshman Rekha, where there is an entirely different set of emotions and emotional resources and emotional strengths that are available to us, which have to do with acceptance, which have to do with clarity, which have to do with courage, which have to do with taking charge, which have to do with confidence and feeling resourced, which have to do with examining one's own role in illness as well as in healing, with realistic hope, not false hope, not no hope, but realistic hope. Things to do with determination, of compassion for oneself and for others, of inclusion to feel supported, to reconcile with the shock and the horror of going through a serious illness like cancer, and then finding meaning in it and using it to grow and to shape the future, and therefore to have meaningful thriving and resilience. So I'm just going to keep this chart up so you can reflect upon it for a minute. And the question that I want to pose to you is, which side of this Lakshman Rekha are you choosing? Whether you are a cancer patient or suffering from any other condition, or even if you are a caregiver, it is a choice that we can make in terms of how we decide which side of this line we decide. Now, it is quite possible, and I feel it as well, even 20 years later, doing all the work that I'm doing, that sometimes I find myself slipping back into the left side. That's natural, that's human, that's okay. But I also know that the right side is available to me. And then I can make a conscious effort to move to the right side and operate from the basis of a thriver.